Hello there, my name's Card. I'm a long-time progressive political community activist and organiser, and here on my YouTube page I like to make a lot of videos about how ideological concepts and ideas play out when applied to real life. What I wanted to talk about today is banning flags in video games, and whether or not it does any good. Now, for those who don't already know what I'm getting at, one of the most commonly edited or censored elements in any media property which might feature them are flags. Usually national flags, and typically those of controversial historic states, but sometimes those just associated with a broad ideology rather than any single institution. As you might have guessed, the most frequently removed flag in media these days is the flag of Nazi Germany, which I would hope we can all agree is a flag emblematic of a very bad state and its very bad ideology. But does simply making an effort to remove it from things like games set in the Second World War do any actual good? I have some doubts. The general reason why games developers and publishers avoid putting Nazi flags in their games is principally the ethical and moral considerations of using the iconography of a group who was responsible for the deaths of millions, within living memory no less. Further still, the law in a handful of countries limits how those sorts of symbols can be displayed, and games distribution platforms like Steam or the PlayStation and Microsoft stores might have policies of their own against Nazi imagery that ends up taking the decisions out of developers' hands anyway. Incidentally, those sorts of actual laws which prohibit the use of Nazi imagery, like they have in Germany and Austria, among other places, often do have sensible carve-outs for their use in art and teaching materials. But those exceptions to the law historically haven't always readily included video games. And while many countries do end up modernising their laws, progress is slow. But games companies would often just rather avoid the legal hassle of challenging several countries' laws in court, and would sooner just not include stuff like swastika flags. As to whether or not it's good, in an ethical sense, to eschew hate symbols, it's pretty hard to quantify. It's not like you run the risk of accidentally radicalizing to the far right, say, every 1 in 10,000 people who might see a Nazi flag. Therefore, you just have to keep the overall numbers low. It's all very immaterial, but it does have to be acknowledged that there is some sort of connection between having something symbolic in a piece of entertainment and making actual supporters of what that symbol represents happy. Usually, if a games company wants to replace a swastika flag with something, they opt for a Maltese cross design or a generic German-esque eagle or something to that effect. But people still end up complaining. They say it's not accurate, or they come crying about the fact there's usually still Soviet flags in the game or something else. And I think the best course of action is just to ignore the mewling demands of the average gamer bro. I remain firmly unconvinced they're going to have anything productive to say. The problem persists today largely because of the fact that there's plenty of people who play games today, whether they're games like World War II shooters or map-painting strategy games set in the mid-20th century or anything else, who are the sorts of people likely to become a little too comfortable with Nazi stuff. Then they go on to become online reactionary dorks and eventually real bigots. When it comes to far-right radicalization, you really ought to nip it in the bud early. It's not like everyone who plays digital World War II war games is a real Nazi, of course. But far too many people for my liking who go through the alt-right pipeline start out as pasty indoor kids with a big thing for military history on their computers. They're the people who really want to see more Nazi stuff they can play around with. And personally, I don't think you should ever concede an inch to them. Nazi iconography is a lot like a gun. You shouldn't be allowed to play around with it until you prove to the sensible adults in the room that you're not going to hurt other people or yourself with it. Until then, you need to learn what it is and why it's potentially dangerous. I'm no big fan of having national laws prohibiting what someone can and can't put in their work, but at the same time, I've never once thought I'd enjoy any entertainment product more than I currently was, if only there were more swastikas in it. So I'm not in any rush to hop on the bandwagon pushing for more Nazi symbols. I think the current situation is just about fine, and it's not like it really matters. If you are one of the people who cry about the censorship of Nazi flags online, you really need to find something more important to care about. And at this point, I really question the motives of anyone doing so. Once again, my name's Card. I hope that gave you something to think about, and feel free to subscribe to this YouTube page if you might want to hear from me again. Bye for now, and have a lovely day.